What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over on fakepigskin.com. With me tonight, it's Damian Dabrowski. What's up, Damian?
Crunch time, baby. We got, week 13 here, so, 3/4 of the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And by now, I mean, look, you know what you need to make the playoffs. You know if you still have a shot. If you're far ahead, you're worried about seeding and kind of, how that's going to play out, maybe looking ahead. But, these next 2 weeks is kind of when it comes. The people at the bottom of the standings have kind of fallen off. So you got to kind of adjust accordingly in terms of free agent bids and things like that. But, this is kind of where champions are made. Obviously you want to say it's week 15, it's week 16 when you're actually in the playoffs. But I think putting yourself in a position to be successful at that time is something, it's a process that starts a little bit earlier. And this is kind of that sweet spot.
Yeah. For some of us, the playoffs have already started. Other ones, it's obviously, like you mentioned, it will be coming in the short weeks. Ron and I talked on Monday a lot of playoff stuff. We kind of looked at some long-term schedule stuff. So if you missed that pod, definitely go back and check that out while you're going to check it out. Make sure you rate and review the show. Does a lot for us. 5 stars. Let us know what you think on the comments. Other people can find our show, and we can help more people and grow as a show. We got some news. We got some quarterback talk. We got some position battle stuff. We'll try and get you a bunch of names that you need to be targeting this week and get you set to win in Week 13. And let's talk some news. Crabtree and Aqib Talib, they both had their suspension reduced to 1 game. It felt like that was going to happen when they gave him 2 games. It was kind of like, okay, let's give us some wiggle room so when they appeal, we can take care of that. So Crabtree will be back next week. Amari Cooper, Damian, are you expecting him to play? Because I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, that did not look good, I think. It's tough to speculate kind of with concussions, but as of now, I would expect for him to be out, like you said.
So be ready to have another plan in place. If you're in deeper leagues, Seth Roberts is a guy that I like this week. It's a decent opportunity against the Giants. They're obviously at home. Maybe it's a little more Jared Cook. The Giants are really bad against tight ends, and then maybe a little bump for Marshawn Lynch. With the way the running back landscape is, to have somebody going to get 20-ish carries, even if he's not going to be super productive with it, is definitely a guy I like. Let's talk about kind of your neck of the woods, Damian, and Mr. Eli Manning. This is the weirdest situation. So the Giants are benching Eli. The Giants are also open to in-season firing of Ben McAdoo. My boy Geno Smith will be starting, but there's also talks of maybe Davis Webb playing the second half, and that's kind of why Eli was benched this week, and because Eli didn't want to not guarantee himself a full game. They were trying to let him get that starts record. I guess from a fantasy perspective, are you just going to avoid the Giants like the plague, or are you still comfortable using certain pieces? Where are you at?
It's definitely a downgrade from where things were with Eli, and that was already a pretty low spot in terms of really Darkwa and Engram being really the only 2 usable pieces. Shepard had that 1 great game, but, with the migraines that we just, it's at a point now where, even if he plays, I don't think we can expect the same type of chemistry with him and whoever they throw in at quarterback as we did with Eli. So you have to be a little bit lower on him. Like you said, the whole situation's a little weird. I don't really have a problem with the Giants benching Eli. They're obviously tanking the season at this point, and they're one of those teams where, the things didn't go as expected for them. This isn't, the Cleveland Browns where they're going to have a top 5 pick and, we expect it to kind of follow for a couple of years. I mean, this is a team that can be in the top 5 this year and could easily be in the playoffs next year because they have the talent on their roster. Yeah. So it makes sense it makes sense if you want to basically bench Eli at this point. I guess the 2, just in the sense of you're tanking, you want a better pick. I've heard some Giants fans say, this team's so bad right now, it doesn't matter whose quarterback we're losing. Well, that's not really the case because I think you guys ruined quite a lot of survivor pools in week 12 against the Chiefs, or even back in week 6 against the Broncos. So, it's clearly not as bad as you think. But what's confusing is the Geno thing. I mean, if they were going to play Davis Webb, sure. figure out what you have in him. You think he was a third-round pick, so obviously they saw something there that they liked. So figure out if you're gonna, if you're gonna have to draft a QB in the first round or not this year. Gino, I actually completely forgot he was even still in the league. I mean, look, we know what Geno Smith is. He's not going to become somebody he's not. At age what is he, 28 now, 29.
Yeah.
And further, the Giants can't really cut Eli because of his cap hit next year. It's like 23 million. So they're basically stuck with him for another year unless they can pull off a trade. I don't know, maybe send him to Jacksonville down there with Tom Coughlin or something.
Arizona, Houston. Well, Houston will get Deshaun back. Maybe Big Ben retires and he goes there, or maybe replaces Kirk Cousins if he leaves in DC. I don't know. I think there will be suitors if they want to move Eli Manning this offseason.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I think if that's the case, then maybe. Well, I guess it depends. Obviously, Eli doesn't have anything to prove at this stage in his career in terms of he's not going to gain or lose any value in these next 6 weeks unless he kind of got hurt, which maybe is another reason to kind of protect him. I respect him for the fact that the whole I'm not going to start just so I can have this streak alive and then sit. Like, if you don't want to play me, don't play me. I respect him for that. I also think he's probably the most overrated quarterback of our generation. So
that's coming from a Patriots fan that was beaten twice in the Super Bowl. So
yeah, and those were the only 2 good years of his career. So. Yeah.
He's a Hall of Famer. I'll just tell you that.
Oh, he's definitely not. But
first ballot.
I'm not saying he's not going to get in. I'm just saying he's nowhere close to Hall of Fame worthy based on his career numbers. But that's a conversation for another time. So yeah, you're down to 2 usable Giants, I guess, and even that. I mean, Ingram's been terrible the last 3 weeks, so it wouldn't.
Are we?
It wouldn't shock me.
We'll talk tight ends here in a bit, but.
I mean, who are you going to avoid him for? It's not like we have 15 tight ends that we want to start each week. It's kind of like, at least we know he's good enough to have good games, which you can't say about most guys at that position. So you probably still have to throw him out there, but you're not going to feel good about it.
Yeah, that's true. It is trending like Sterling Shepard could play this week, so that's good news. Although we talked about that quarterback situation, it's definitely a mess. If you're desperate in super deep leagues, I don't hate Geno. I know. Damian's going to vehemently disagree with me, but that's fine. I'm used to that. I love terrible quarterbacks, and here we are. Speaking of terrible quarterbacks, and here we are. Jameis Winston is going to start for Tampa this week. I guess are the Bucs real dumb, or we got to assume that he's healthy, right? That's why they're playing him this week, because they're clearly not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, well. I mean, look, they're not like eliminated, but it is a pretty long shot for them to kind of turn things around here with the other teams in that division. So I think you're right. I think we have to assume that he's actually healthy enough to play, and it's not the Bucs basically, trying to use this kind of a last-ditch effort to sneak into the playoffs. But it's tough because you don't like starting quarterbacks, especially off a shoulder injury, right? If it was a knee injury or something like that, maybe a little bit easier. But at the same time, the Green Bay secondary is a mess. We like some of the weapons there in Tampa. So I think I'm in a spot where, it's going to depend on kind of the rest of your team and if you're really, requiring kind of 25 points from your quarterback in order to have a shot, or if you're kind of strong enough elsewhere where you can take a chance that Winston maybe doesn't look great in this spot. But I think you're in a situation this week where there's a few other guys like Matt Stafford and Dak Prescott, for instance, who I really don't like. Andy Dalton, yep. And I think I can make the case that you should start Winston over those guys with the matchup and kind of working under the assumption that if he wasn't healthy enough to go out there, they wouldn't be throwing him out there. So definitely not a top 12 play for me. But I think once you get in that kind of 15 to 20 range, I think I can see taking him over those guys that we just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely right there for me. Like, I'm playing him over Alex Smith. I'm playing him over Mariota. I'm playing him over Dak Prescott. And he's pretty available after the the injury and all that stuff. He's only 44% owned in Yahoo leagues. He's gonna be one of my featured guys on my streamer column, and I'll use him this week, and I think it's a good spot for him. I don't think Green Bay is very good, but as we saw from from a week ago that at least the Packers offense looks like they can do enough to keep this game interesting. So he'll have to throw. And does Cameron Brate become a guy that you can actually play again, or are you gonna need to see it before you play him?
The splits with him are obviously much better with Winston. He was kind of a top 8 tight end before Fitzpatrick took over, and then the last 4 weeks it's been a disaster. But it's hard for me to buy in after kind of 4 weeks of that. If it was like one Fitzpatrick game or even 2 Fitzpatrick games, then I could kind of see that flipping back. But after a month, it seems like maybe it was just a change in kind of their play calling. Or their offensive scheme there, where I'm going to have to see something from him before I put him in my lineup again.
Yep. Cam Newton, he looks like a really good option this week, but the Saints are supposed to get Lattimore and Ken Crawley back. They both practiced today. Does that worry you if you're a Cam Newton owner to see those guys coming back on the field?
No, Cam's such a bad passer that it's almost irrelevant who's actually playing corner. It's just he's running again. They're using him at the goal line, and when they're doing that, it doesn't really matter what he does in the pass game. He can throw for 200 yards, he can throw 3 picks. If he's getting you 15 points on the ground, it's like, who cares what he does through the air? So I guess sure, it's better if they're out, but Cam's not really, I think, a guy that's. It's not kind of little nuanced things in coverage that are throwing him off. He's just not good at throwing the ball accurately.
Yeah, it seems like a problem when you're a quarterback, but here we are. Jared Goff, a guy that you trust this week at Arizona? I mean, he's been solid.
Yeah, right. I think, we had the bad Minnesota game there. But the thing, aside from Peterson, the rest of the Arizona secondary is definitely exploitable, and they really kind of took care of the Cardinals. They're in their first matchup, I believe it was 33-0 or something like that. So I think Goff's shown enough. And kind of the creativity in that offense where, even and in this case, there's not really a clear number one for Patrick Peterson to take away, whether he goes on Watkins, which I think is probably what will happen just because Kupp is getting more slot action. There's enough other options in that offense for Goff to go to.
Yeah, the Robert Woods, it looks like they took him from out to like doubtful, questionable, and he hasn't practiced yet, but. If he practices Thursday, Friday, there could be a shot. My guess is it's not this week, but next. Case Keenum is another guy at Atlanta that interests me. Pretty available. Is he a guy that you're comfortable rolling out there if you own him?
Yep, him and McCown are 2 of the guys that I would also kind of put ahead of that. Stafford, Prescott, Alex Smith. Good matchups here, obviously, for McCown against the Chiefs, but also for Keenum. Atlanta had a lot of injuries in their secondary last game. Trufant left with a concussion. I believe Poole, who's their slot corner, left with an injury as well. So if either of those guys are out, I think that's obviously helps Keenum. But he's got weapons now, with Diggs and Thielen and Rudolph. I think even in a tough matchup, he's not going to explode maybe like he did on Thanksgiving with the rushing score, but I think he's got a pretty solid floor and enough upside to kind of be at the back end of that QB1 discussion this week.
Totally agree. Let's talk running backs, and I want to throw out a few names, and then we'll see where kind of some of the guys that are interested to you. Devaugntah Freeman's actually supposed to play this week. It's not a great matchup against Minnesota, but I think if he's out there, you have to play him, right?
Probably, if you had Freeman, it's, you probably felt pretty good kind of with your running back situation in the beginning of the year. So unless you were fortunate enough to pick up, Pirine or Jamal Williams or somebody who's kind of come into a feature role here lately, you're probably going to need to play him. I don't feel great about it. I think, somebody like Dion Lewis.
Are you playing Samaje Perine, Jamal Williams, Latavius Murray, Alex Collins over Devaughtah Freeman this week?
Yeah, it's close with Murray, but I'm probably playing all those other guys right now. I think with Perine and Jamal Williams, They're getting the workload.
Hmm.
Same thing with Dion Lewis for me. Probably Latavius too, because even though he's not getting 20 carries, he's getting all the goal line work. And that offense is moving the ball. I think the concern here is, I mean, Freeman missed 2 weeks and it didn't seem like he was really close to playing.
Yeah.
Now obviously now that he's back at practice and so he can play, but it's hard for me to see him going missing 2 weeks and then getting 20 touches the first game
Yeah.
back, especially when you consider that the last three or so before he got hurt, he was only getting 10, 11 carries. So I just, and with this being a close game, I don't think it's going to be a game script where Atlanta's going to be able to run the ball 35 times either. So I don't think the workload is going to be there even if he plays. I'd look at him as kind of a flex play this week, probably somewhere between 10 and 14 touches, not kind of the usual 18 to 20 that we were coming to expect heading into the season.
Yeah, and if he takes a hit the wrong way, he might end up leaving that game early again, and they might not risk it depending on what's happening. Tevin Coleman, a guy you're still comfortable rolling out in leagues where you own him?
Well, between the two, I'd actually probably prefer Freeman. I just think if he does play, he's going to get the majority of their touches there. But Coleman does have kind of the playability where he doesn't require the same touch floor to be a viable flex play. So I'd probably still feel comfortable using him, especially like you said, if Freeman kind of gets hit the wrong way or re-aggravates it, then he could be in for a bigger workload, in the second half.
For sure. I'm going to throw out a few notes. Alex Collins didn't practice today. He's dealing with a calf injury. Amir Abdullah didn't practice with a neck injury. Same thing for Adrian Peterson. Those three names, we probably expect all of them to play, but keep an eye on them. They should, make sure that nothing weird happens Thursday or Friday. Those are the practice reports you really need to pay attention to. Fournette's full practice, so he should be good to go. Kenyan Drake. It looks like Damian Williams is going to miss this week. You think Drake's a guy that's kind of on that, top 20 RB in terms of ranking this week?
Maybe on the fringe of that. I think I'm still not sure they really want to make a full commitment to him. I'm not. We'll see if they bring in somebody else who kind of becomes what forms as a depth chart behind him this week. But he's not really. It's weird because in college he was more of kind of the scat back, kick return, third down guy, and here it seemed like he was more of the early downs back, with Williams getting a lot of that pass work. So he did catch a touchdown there after Williams got hurt against the Pats. So he probably will see a few targets. Now, I don't love this matchup against Denver. I know it's tough because it kind of seems like they might be packing it in as well, but this is probably going to be an ugly game. I don't think he's going to be particularly efficient. So you're betting on volume, which isn't the worst thing if the guy is going to get touches. But I really have trouble kind of seeing him as more than a flex play right now.
Yeah, I don't think you can play any Denver guys on the other side. I don't think you can play any Cowboys. I mean, maybe Alf Morris, but that team's a mess, and don't really know what to expect. Do you expect Doug Martin this week?
At this point, no. I think we'll see. That's an interesting situation, just because in past instances where Martin has been out, they've really ridden Jacquizz Rodgers, kind of given him all the touches really. Which again, kind of a weird development considering where he was early in his career, is really solely kind of a third down back, mostly in the pass game, and then kind of gets to Tampa and he starts getting 25 carries a game in certain situations. So we'll see. I know Peyton Barber had the 2 short touchdowns last week.
Yeah.
I think it might be different where they have a whole week to kind of prep for the game plan, knowing Martin is out, as opposed to him getting hurt mid game. And it's not like Barber. I mean, he had 5 carries for 7 yards. So aside from the scores, he wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah.
I don't feel great about it, though. I think it would have to be a pretty deep league for you to feel comfortable starting Rodgers. I think an interesting name this week is Derrick Henry, just because he's looked so much better than Murray, and I guess we still haven't really seen any indication that the Titans are willing to make that switch. Last week, kind of against the Colts there, I mean, they were in danger of losing that game, and Murray wasn't doing anything Henry's the one that really kind of got him down the field the entire way on that drive, and then Murray got the cheap touchdown there at the end. So, if that situation were to flip, I definitely think that would be advantageous for the Titans. But they seem pretty stubborn, and it looks like they're still kind of going to be in playoff contention.
Yeah, that's not happening. Like I think there's a chance that if the Titans play well, especially after the way they got their ass kicked down in Houston, they could both guys could get a lot of touches. I think Derrick Henry could get you yards, but like you mentioned last week, they'll flip to DeMarco Murray when they get in close, and all of a sudden he gets a touchdown. So, any other running backs you're looking at this week if you're kind of desperate, or Baltimore is still kind of a mess. Austin Eckler's kind of a thing. Anybody that you're interested in terms of those guys?
Burkhead coming off this past week, I think he got dropped a lot after kind of the disappointing game against the Raiders and the fumble. And obviously, you're listening to this after kind of waivers have processed for most leagues. So it might be a moot point, but I think it's interesting that he kind of got all that work despite the fumble last week. Yep. Especially at the goal line, just because we've seen Lewis in that role mainly. And obviously, he's a very good receiver. So I think he's a guy you can actually feel pretty good about as kind of a low-end RB2 flex play this week. I think they're going to have a lot of success running the ball there, both him and Lewis. So that's a guy if you have. And I think, Darkwa, again, I know he's coming off his worst game against the Redskins, but we have to assume that, the Giants are going to kind of try to rely on the ground game to set up the pass there, just because I'm sure they probably don't want to keep getting into, 3 and outs. So he's a guy that, and with the Raiders down, Cooper and Crabtree possibly, I don't think their offense is going to be as explosive as we've seen in some earlier weeks. Yeah. So that could be kind of a clock control game where Darkwa could see a lot more touches. So that's 2 names for you that I think I might be a little bit higher on than kind of the general consensus.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that could be a game that's really low scoring, and they're trying to take pressure off of whoever's under center. Darkwa could get his 20 touches and maybe 70 yards. Hopefully falls in the end zone. Let's shift our focus, talk wide receivers. There's a lot of guys. A couple names that stand out to me. I think Davante Adams is a must play. I know it sounds weird, but he's been a top 20 guy with the last 4 weeks. Brett Hundley seems to look his way, and even when the Packers don't do a ton on offense, he seems to get his 6, 7, 8 catches, maybe 80 yards, and hope he finds the end zone. I think he's a guy that if you own him, you need to play him this week.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable, and it's been surprising given how bad Hundley had been prior to last week. But they clearly have a connection, and like you said, I think he's a clear wide receiver too this week. It's an interesting week. I think there's a lot of guys kind of on the injury report early in the week, and aside from your stud plays, I think we're seeing a lot of a lot of names. Kind of these mid-tier guys that people had given up kind of due to poor starts that are really kind of coming back on the scene in a big way now. Obviously Robbie Anderson has gone from somebody who was kind of a fringe play to, 5 straight games with a touchdown, basically a solid wide receiver 2 now. Jamison Crowder coming off his best game of the year and absolutely, terrific spot against the Cowboys here. They haven't been able to stop anybody in the slot all year. So a couple bounce back.
We saw what Keenan Allen did to him a week ago. I mean, Jameson could easily do a very similar role.
Right. So, that's somebody that probably was still on the wire in some shallower leagues going into the week. And then once you get a little bit lower, I think, it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens in Tennessee with Rashard Matthews. I know Corey Davis was kind of the chalk play last week. We really expect a lot from him, and that was a disappointment. But we'll see kind of what happens with the targets there. And I mean,
in terms of the Titans, I'm starting the running backs. I'm starting Delaney Walker, and that's it. I'm not touching any of those wide receivers. I don't trust them.
Yeah, well, and it's tough too because Houston's so bad against the pass that somebody's going to have to get it. It's just you're not going to know who. But also, a little bit lower, I think Mo Sanu against the Vikings. We have to assume Rhodes is going to be on Julio, which gives Sanu a great matchup with Waynes there. Mm-hmm. Probably won't throw for another touchdown, but although do you see his passing stats for the year? I mean, I knew they were good because I remember him from Cincinnati. but he's 6 for 6 for like 240 yards and 3 touchdowns. I
Yeah,
mean,
they should. He could probably start for like 5 or 6 teams. He could start for the
yeah,
Giants. It'd be better than whatever they're running out this week.
somebody might give him a QB deal next year. So watch out for that. But aside from him, also go ahead.
I was gonna say, are you starting the Broncos guys, Demarius, Emmanuel Sanders? Like I saw Emmanuel dropped in one of my leagues, and it's I mean it's not a deep league by any means, but for a guy that's pretty widely owned, like he's been really annoying. Had a couple games where he was really good. Other than that, it's been a lot of single digits, and then there was the game he missed. Like, are you just playing him until the end, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, Thomas is probably a low end wide receiver too. Sanders is a flex. I think Simeon's going to be good. Relatively speaking here to what we were seeing with, Paxton Lynch for a little bit there, and even Brock Osweiler. I know he kind of seemed to fall apart, there prior to getting benched, but I think earlier in the season he was certainly a competent quarterback, and I do think he's kind of the best option for that pass game right now. So I would probably still start both of those guys. You just kind of have to lower your expectations here a little bit, but then the last name I was going to mention was Marquis Lee. I mean, coming off a complete dud because of Patrick Peterson in Arizona, but now he gets Indianapolis. A much better matchup. We'll see if Melvin is still out for the Colts. Even if he's back, he's obviously nowhere near the level of shutdown guy that Peterson is. So I think they're going to try to get Marquis Lee back on track here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like Blake Bortles this week, and I kind of like D.D. Westbrook in deeper leagues. Him and Seth Roberts are kind of my two guys that I like if you're digging deep. Let's talk tight ends. Obviously, this is the wasteland of a position. I own Zach Ertz in one league, and I really regret not owning him in more places. It is so nice to have a plug-and-play tight end that you don't have to worry about, that produces every week, that has been super solid, carries me on some weeks. I just it's mind-boggling how nice it's been.
Yeah, it's definitely a luxury for sure. But actually, as a whole, there's definitely a lot of question marks here. But this week in particular, I've actually found myself in a couple of leagues trying to grab a second tight end to use as a flex. I'm doing it with Hunter Henry in a couple places just because of that matchup and the increased targets he saw last week.
Yeah, but last week he did stuff, so this week he'll be a complete goose egg.
Yeah, probably.
I did have him in one DFS lineup, which was very nice last week.
That'll be the first goose egg against the Browns this year from a tight end. So I'm willing to take that shot. And then, same thing with Jared Cook, I think, with the guys in Oakland being out, and the matchup against the Giants. So those are the two obvious kind of flowchart teams where, if whoever's playing them has a tight end who, knows how to catch a football, you should probably try to find a way to get him in your lineup. I'm still out on Greg Olson. I didn't play him anywhere last week. I needed to see that game, and he couldn't give it to us. He obviously left early. We'll see if he plays, but I think even if he plays, I'm not comfortable using him. I think I'd still prefer somebody like Safarian Jenkins to him. And then I think you're just going to have to, accept, whether it's, Jason Witten, for instance, obviously not going to impress anybody, but he'll catch, 5 or 6 dump offs and, get you 50 yards, which isn't a lot, but it's a little bit of stability, which, I don't think you're getting with some other guys. And I guess, looking a little bit further down, maybe Charles Clay in a shootout in New England.
Yeah, I love Clay this week. I think Jared Cook is a top 10-ish option. I'd be very fine playing him. He might be a top 5 for me, honestly, this week, the schedule and everything. Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah, that's where I was just about to go.
That's what I was going to say. So 3 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. I know he doesn't get a ton of targets, but, this is a guy I liked. He's obviously making a transition from receiver to tight end. I picked him up in a couple of deep leagues. I don't hate the spot, and, as long as the Yo Gabba Gabba's back there doing his thing, I don't hate Ricky Seals-Jones.
Well, so the first week, the 2 touchdown game against the Texans, he literally played 8 snaps. which might be, the first time I think in like fantasy history we've had somebody, finish the week top 5 at their position and play, less than 10 snaps.
But it's crazy
But
because he got 8 snaps and he got 5 targets in that game. So like when he
right.
went out there, they were looking for him.
Right, that's what you want, but at the same time, that's kind of a problem if the defense knows where you're going with the ball just by your formation. And if you're Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, it probably doesn't matter. If you're Blaine Gabbert, it's probably going to start to matter. So I don't. I mean, I'm not ready to kind of commit to him. I have no issue picking him up in deeper leagues, but I definitely don't feel kind of a comfort level in terms of the workload he's going to get, just because Gresham is still seeing so many snaps. And you talked about the conversion, from receiver. They obviously don't feel comfortable with Seals Jones being a blocker for them at this kind of point in the season. So I mean, he definitely could still get some red zone looks. And I think, in a 2 tight end league, for instance, I definitely think he's an option there. But I'd have a hard time kind of stretching him into a tight end 1. And kind of one other guy that I'll mention is OJ Howard. Just we knocked on Brait earlier. I think, you always say how tight end is kind of one of the toughest positions to learn as a rookie. So a lot of guys, it takes a while for them to come on. I know Howard did have some big plays, but most of them came on kind of broken coverages, or busted coverages where he was just wide open for long touchdowns. But, we don't know for sure if kind of the change over the last couple of weeks in terms of Howard over Brait has been a schematic change, or it's just been Fitzpatrick not wanting to throw to Brait. So you probably won't know that until we see how it goes with Winston. But it wouldn't surprise me if Howard keeps kind of trending up and finishes the year strong here.
Yeah, I'm not as optimistic. Ron was saying kind of the same thing, and he thought like a Hunter Henry-esque kind of finish to the season. I think honestly it goes right back to Brait, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, and I'll probably be wrong again. Jimmy G is starting for the Niners. George Kittle's been a guy that we like. Marquise Goodwin, Carlos Hyde. Do you like the Niners a little bit more this week with Jimmy G under center, or do you think it's going to be kind of much of the same?
It's hard to tell because I do think that Garoppolo is going to be much more efficient in the pass game than Beathard was. But, in a weird way, the Niners just having some value. Like, I mean, Carlos Hyde, 13 targets last week. That's not going to happen if the offense is moving the ball a little bit better. At the same time, that should help his run game efficiency. The thing with Goodwin is he's so one-dimensional in terms of kind of the go routes that I think, if Pierre Garçon was still healthy, he would be a guy that I think would get the biggest bump with somebody like Garoppolo coming in. But I don't really know what the Niners are going to kind of do in their short and intermediate game. Maybe, Trent Taylor picks up a few more catches. I know he's been playing, but just kind of, again, the efficiency thing here. Aldrick Robinson is kind of the same thing as Goodwin in terms of downfield guys. So, yeah, I mean, it does seem like Hyde and the tight ends are really kind of the best option to move the ball. But, this is going to be an interesting game. In Chicago, the Bears do have a pretty good defense. We know they're going to try to control the ball with Howard and kind of a conservative game plan on that side. So I certainly don't expect a shootout here. I think Garoppolo should play well, but I don't know if it's going to translate to a lot of fantasy stats. And really, besides Carlos Hyde, I don't really know how many guys on that side of the ball you can feel comfortable playing.
Yeah. Let's finish up with some defenses. Ben Rolfe will have an article up on some defenses that you can target. Make sure you check out Fake Pigskin if you are listening to the podcast. If you're not checking us out live on YouTube, you're missing out. We're here every Monday and Wednesday. Before we talk defense real quick, Damian, I did want to thank our sponsor, Draft. If you're playing DFS and you're not winning as much as you'd like, you need to come over and play with our friends Draft. 80% better chance of winning than on salary cap sites. So if you're playing on DraftKings, playing on FanDuel, it's not going well, come play on Draft. It's a lot more fun. You get to do basically 5-man rosters, and it's all a snake draft, what we love to do before the season starts. So you get, okay, I have the 3rd pick, but then, it's going to wrap right around to me, and you grab a quarterback and some tight end, 2 receivers. You can avoid tight end like the plague. It's super fun. More than 1 million people have already tried it. You can also play NBA. There's MLBs around the corner. We will have all kinds of stuff there. Make sure you go to playdraft.com/fakepigskin or download the app from iTunes, Google Play, wherever you happen to get your apps. If you have not signed up, sign up, deposit $5. You get an extra free money draft. You also get a year of Fake Pigskin Elite. So all of our premium content over on Fake Pigskin, if you go read some articles and you can't get into them because they're premier and you can't afford to pay, that's fine. Go deposit $5. You get a year of Fake Pigskin Elite. And you get a free real money entry into a draft that you can use tonight on NBA. You can use this weekend on NFL, whatever you want. So check that out and have some fun playing draft. All right, Damian, let's talk defenses before we get out of here. The Chargers, I think, are my favorite that are widely available. They're facing the guy that is the human turnover machine in Deshaun Kaiser. Bosa and Ingram, I just expect them to wreck shop this week.
Absolutely. I was bidding very heavily on them. Only ended up getting them in one place. Kind of pissed at myself for not doing it a week sooner. Just kind of in anticipation of this matchup because they actually have a great schedule the rest of the year. So they're a defense that I wasn't really hesitant to bid on because I knew that I could actually use them for the rest of the year. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to kind of have Jacksonville in a few places. But really, aside from them, this is kind of a tough week for streaming defenses. Most of kind of the teams in the top 10 are pretty heavily owned. I think the Patriots, are up there now in terms of ownership percentage, but they've obviously been playing much better. I think kind of the two teams that you can probably still get if you want, the Titans going up against Tom Savage.
I would be a little careful of that matchup. It looks really good on paper. Tom Savage will do some turnovers, and the Titans have been able to, create turnovers, especially Kevin Byard. But our secondary is so bad. But maybe it's I don't know, maybe if you want a safe floor, it's probably fine. But if you're looking for a defense to produce some serious fantasy points, I would look other places.
Right. Yeah, like I said, really the only thing you can kind of hope for is turnovers when you're looking at streaming defenses. Usually the yardage or the points allowed won't hurt you as much if you can get, obviously if you can get a touchdown, but even, just a couple, a few sacks, a couple picks, things like that. So you want to try to get, bad quarterbacks on the road. You talked about the Chicago-San Francisco matchup. It's not as great as if it was Beathard, I think, but I still think it's okay with the Bears just because I don't think the Niners have a lot of playmakers outside of Hyde. And then, after that, it gets ugly. I guess you can say
I don't even mind the Niners in that matchup. I think they could be decent. I think they have an ability to get some turnovers, and with Mitchell back there slinging it, some turnovers will be up for grabs. I think Oakland is going to be a team that a lot of people just go gravitate towards, especially if you're missed out on the Chargers or something via waiver wire. But man, they have one interception on the year. I know it's Geno Smith and probably Davis Webb, and it probably works out okay. But I don't know. I think Geno's not terrible, and I think he could. I mean, we saw Trevor Siemian come in last week, play the second half, and get 2 touchdowns. I don't know. I might not. I might run away from that one too.
Yeah, I don't want. I don't want anything to do with the Raiders. And same thing with the Dolphins. I know some people might want to play them just because of Simeon there, but this is almost a week where I'd almost rather just kind of maybe start kind of the defense I've been using, even if they don't have great matchups. For instance, kind of like the Saints against the Panthers.
What about Seattle? They're playing at home, but they don't have Chancellor, they don't have Richard Sherman, and the Philadelphia Eagles, the juggernaut offense, is coming to town. Are you sitting Seattle in favor of Houston, in favor of Tennessee, in favor of the Chargers, in favor of Chicago, something like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I dropped Seattle everywhere I had him last week. I can't buy into the defense without Sherman, without Cam Chancellor, without Griffin, who's not even that Griffin's good, but they're down to like their 4th and 5th string corners. They still have Bobby Wagner, obviously a great player, and Michael Bennett, but it's just hard to kind of get a lot of production when you're down to that many backups. So I'm out on the Seahawks. I think the Eagles are fine just because the Seahawks O-line is so bad that, and Wilson's kind of been on this little interception streak. So they'll give up points, but they'll be able to get some turnovers. But yeah, this is a week where I think I'm sticking even, something like the Vikings. I don't like their matchup, but I'm not dropping the Vikings. To go get the Raiders for this week or something like that, because I just don't think there's enough of benefit there.
Yeah, and sometimes when you get a little too cute with those defenses, they get burned, and the one you would have played would have been just fine, or So yeah, I'm with you there. I think I'm staying. Minnesota, I'm fine with. Carolina, that one scares me a little bit, but and I kind of like Denver. I know they're, if you've been holding on to them through the kind of the bumps and bruises at Miami, I think they'll be just fine this week. All right, Damian, this was a lot of fun. It was good to catch up. If you guys have any more questions, if you have debates you're doing with your lineup, at FPAOP on Twitter, D_bro1389 at NotoriousKRO. Tweet us. Let us know. We're always around to help. Make sure you are checking out Fake Pigskin each and every day. There's so much good content going up there. With Senior Bowl and the draft coming, we have profiles going up. We have DFS going up. We have baseball will be here before we know it. So make sure you're checking that out. But for Damian Dabrowski, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.